Hello and welcome to Kurious City. My name is Letty and I'm one of the co-founders of Kurious Arts. This is a podcast all about encouraging people to get curious about what's going on creatively across the city. I will be talking to a collection of individuals and organisations and companies that are making an impact, and it's all about trying to encourage you to get off the sofa and get out into the world. Let's have a listen to who we're talking to today. Hello and welcome to another episode of Kurious City. Today I'm delighted to say I am with the writer of contemporary fiction and creative writing teacher / mentor, Susan Elliot Wright, who has just published her fourth novel, The Flight of Cornelia Blackwood, which explores themes around maternal mental health. Susan, hello and welcome.
Hi there, Letty. Thanks for having me on.
You're so welcome. Okay, so I'm going to come back to the fact that it's your fourth novel, which is pretty amazing. But just tell us a bit about The Flight of Cornelia Blackwood.
Cornelia. Well, it's interesting, the fact that this is my fourth novel. It started as a short story long before I'd written any novels.
Okay.
And the thing with that short story was that it got quite a good response. It got a couple of placings in competitions, but didn't quite get there. And I think it's because I knew there was more to say about that character and her situation. I tried it some years later as a radio play, but that didn't quite work. And it was when I was planning my fourth novel, I had an idea about a character who coveted another woman's child. And that was just the idea that was in my head. But I didn't know why, couldn't quite get to the root of her motivation, I suppose. And then I was sort of agonising over this, trying to plan it for weeks and weeks, and suddenly it just dropped into my head. It's Cornelia from that short story. It's Cornelia Blackwood. She had the same name in the short story.
Okay.
That's who it is. That's what her backstory is. And once I knew that, I was able to plan this novel, which is something I don't usually do. And I wrote the first draft in 4 months, which is astonishing for me.
Yes,
It usually takes me a year to 18 months for a first draft.
You do say that that's your worst part of the writing process.
Yeah.
And why did you choose to explore that particular theme? Did it come from
the maternal mental health aspect?
Yeah.
It's because I struggled myself when I had my children, which was over 30 years ago. And
you got married very young, didn't you?
Yes, I did. I got married when I was 18. My bad. Well, it would have been okay if he was a nice man, but he wasn't.
No.
I had my first child when I was just 22.
Gosh.
And and she was very much wanted and planned for, but it just knocked me for six. I just didn't expect the level of exhaustion and sleeplessness and the huge responsibility. And it sounds crazy to say that now, because being responsible for another human life is obviously quite a big deal.
It's massive. Especially if you're not getting any help, really.
Yeah, that's it. And I was not getting any help from my partner. I mean, a bit of support from parents, but I was so young. My mum was working, his mum was working.
Sure.
So it knocked me for six, and I started to have some very odd thoughts and feelings, and I started to see things that weren't there. And I mean, it was pretty
terrifying.
Big time.
Yeah.
I didn't realise at the time. I was later, so when she was about 8 months old, I was diagnosed with postnatal depression. But by that time, I felt a lot better. And it was honestly only when I was researching this book and I was interviewing a perinatal psychiatrist that I realised and he said, you have postnatal psychosis. It was a fairly mild form, but it was a psychosis. And I was hearing things, I was seeing things. I thought my daughter, she was a baby, she was a little baby, but I was looking at her thinking, she knows more than I do. She knows I'm no good at this. She knows I'm not a competent mother.
Gosh.
And it was really weird. I mean, it was very, very odd.
Did you have anyone you could talk to about it at the time?
No, I think I sort of knew that it wasn't normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I kept it to myself. The only one I talked to my sister, just about not on a, oh my God, I'm going through this and I don't know what's happening. And my sister was younger than me, so she was only 19. And she says, I knew from the way you talked, I knew there was something wasn't right, but I didn't know what to do about it. It was just, I talked about some of the dreams I had, which were really, really bizarre and quite horrific. And she said, yeah, I knew there was something odd. So, yeah, didn't share it.
And had you had a history of mental health or anything before that? So completely out of the blue?
Completely out of the blue, yeah.
Gosh. Yeah. And you say that, one of the best things about being a writer is when you write something that has, that strikes a real chord. Yes. And this book has done that, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And I was very, very nervous about the book coming out because there are parts of it that really are not an easy read. And I've put my character through far worse than I've ever been through. So she does suffer quite a bit, and there've been a couple of sort of negative reviews, and people have said, "Oh, this should come with a trigger warning because it can be quite upsetting." But overwhelmingly, it's been so positive, and I've had emails I had an email from one woman, and that's, people had been talking about the trigger aspect, and a couple of lovely reviewers had said, it should have a trigger, but this is, a great read, and it's a really important subject, etc., etc. But one woman emailed me, and she said, I didn't feel, and she put in inverted commas, I didn't feel triggered, if that's the word. She said, I felt heard. Because it was the first time I've come across this not only in fiction, but I've not really seen it talked about in non-fiction.
No.
And she said, this is my experience. This was what happened to me, not in the same form as my fictional character, obviously. But she said, yeah, that was a few years ago, and it haunts me, and I've never talked to anybody about it.
Do you think it's still, because mental health in general is being talked about so much more.
Much more.
But do you think this particular area, this, postpartum psychosis, is still kept under wraps? I
do. I think postnatal psychosis or postnatal depression, postnatal depression is talked about much more than it ever was. It was touched upon, but there is a stigma. There's a stigma to all mental health issues, as we know, that still exists. I think for postnatally it might be a bit more so. When going back to my experience, and I know that was a long time ago, sort of 30 odd years ago, but at the time it seemed we'd come a long way then. But my ex-husband actually used the fact, or thought he was using the fact, that I'd had postnatal depression in our divorce I divorced him, but he was sort of defending it, saying basically she's mad, that's why she's trying to divorce me, because she had postnatal depression. And of course, when he went to court, and the judge said, "Well, you've admitted that your wife had this," and it was not quite what he expected.
No, it backfired.
But that goes to show what the idea that he thought it was an accusation. You've had postnatal depression.
There's something wrong with
There's
you.
something wrong with you,
broken.
rather than you are unwell.
Yeah.
So that's then. It is being talked about more. Interestingly, I worked in around 2000, the early 2000s. Again, that's probably quite a long time ago now, I guess, when I was working in journalism, and I worked on baby magazines, and I freelanced for quite a few of those sort of family and baby magazines. And I was constantly pitching ideas about for features on postnatal depression, and they just didn't want to know. And I think the reason is it spoils that lovely, serene, it's all roses and fluffy, and we've all had we've had a baby, and everything's wonderful.
And now I'm complete.
Yeah. Nothing's wrong. And the other thing, sleepless nights. People talked about sleepless nights with a bit of a giggle, oh, I bet you're having a few sleepless nights, you've just had a baby. Ho. But the level of exhaustion is it can be, especially if you have no help, it can be very damaging, I think.
Yeah. Do you think that there is a theme that runs throughout your novels? Do you tend to write about characters that are struggling with something, or that have complicated issues or obstacles to overcome?
Oh, yes, yeah, because we wouldn't be interested otherwise, would
no,
we?
It's all too easy.
Yeah, got to put them through their paces. So, yes, I do. My novels, I think none of my novels run on from each other, but they all have in common, they tend to be about family relationships. Often it is about a mother-child relationship, and whether that's a mother and baby or an adult, and a mother of an adult child. I'm very interested in mothering in general, mothering and motherhood. They all feature that in some way, and I think they all touch on maternal mental health, actually. I think they do all touch on it, even if it's not a theme.
An explicit theme.
So, it is with Cornelia, but the others, it's sort of there as maybe a subplot or in the background, yeah.
And your relationship to Sheffield, so you've been here for about 12 years?
15, came here
15,
in 2005,
gosh, okay.
yes, yeah.
And that was a real, sort of bid for freedom, leaving South London
Yes,
and the
I
horrid
didn't realise that
husband.
at the time, because we sort of came up here, and I came up to do the MA at Sheffield Hallam, the writing MA, and we thought we'd probably be here for a couple of years, but we both fell in love, but me particularly absolutely fell in love with Sheffield.
And when you say we?
My husband, Mr.
Wright.
Mr. Wright. Mr. Wright. Absolutely, Mr. Wright, yes. Not the nasty man I was married to before. No. So yes, Mr. Wright. And just fell in love with the place, and I felt very quickly that this was home.
Wow.
I ain't going anywhere else.
Good. What is it about Sheffield that you love?
So many things. As a writer, I think it's a great place for creative people to be. There's so much going on creatively. It's a wonderful place to be a writer. There's all sorts of little writers' groups. There's a writers' hub here. Yeah. There are open mic nights for writers. There are, book groups and writing groups. And also the other arts as well, the visual arts, music. It's a great music city. Yeah. It's just, there seems to be a hum of creativity around Sheffield. Yeah. Not only that, but of course there's the lovely green spaces and parks, and we're very near to the Peak District, which is fantastic. Yeah. And it's true what people say, people in Sheffield are very, very friendly.
They are friendly.
They really are.
Yeah. So. Well, I actually did the same thing. I came up to do the MA.
Oh, right. I didn't realise that,
from London, and thought it was temporary, and then accidentally stayed.
Yeah. How long ago was that?
It's going to be 3 years this year.
Right, okay, yeah.
But anyway.
Happens to a lot of us,
I
think. Yes.
And university students. So we've got one of the highest retention rates, haven't we?
We have, absolutely, yeah.
Now, going back to the difficulty, you describe the first draft, or writing in general, as painful, agonising and torturous.
Yeah, that's the one.
So... Why?
Why do I do it?
Why do you put yourself through that agonising process on a daily basis?
Well, there's two reasons. One is, I always say about writing is that writing is full of highs and lows. The lows can be very, very low, but the highs can be stratospheric. The highs can be fantastic. But the main reason is I can't not. And I know it sounds a bit, I don't know, to say this, but it's almost like a vocation or a calling. I can't not do it. And I've heard other writers say the same thing, that sometimes when things aren't going well, you think, oh, that's it. I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm going to get a proper job and just carry on, and I'm not going to put myself through this agony. And you might do that for a while. You might do it for weeks, months, even. I know people who've done it for years. But
it gets you in the end.
It gets you in the end. It'll call you back in the end, yeah.
So is it something you've always done?
I guess, but I'm not one of those writers who says, I wrote my first book when I was 5 and, made it up out of this, and I've always wanted to be a writer. Well, I have always wanted to be a writer, but I wiped it out early on. That couldn't happen to people like me. No. Exactly. Exactly. I didn't come from a literary family, didn't go to university till I was in my 30s, and those, I just thought, that's not for me. But I was always a big reader.
Yes.
And I, at school, English was my favourite subject, and composition, so yeah, I've always written, I guess.
And was there one, you read all the time still now, don't you? You start every day with a bit of a read.
Absolutely, yeah.
Could you pinpoint a book that had an impact on you, or made you think, actually, maybe I can do this, or yes, I really want to have a go at this?
Yeah, not maybe I can do this. I still don't think that. I still think, oh wow, I seem to have done it sometimes.
Hopefully, I won't get found out.
Yes, but there was a particular book that made me want to be a writer, and that was The Awakening by Kate Chopin. Don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yes.
So that was published at the end of the 19th century. And it's an American book, and it's
dense.
A very dense read.
Yeah.
It's not a beach read. No. And the first time I read it when I was doing A-level, actually, which again I did very late in life. I did that after my first marriage, when I left my first marriage. But I read it at A-level, and the first time I read it, I thought, oh, God, I can't get through this. This is so dense. But I started to see the beautiful imagery in it, and the metaphors in it and what was going on with the female character. And I got to the end of it and I thought, that is so fantastic. And I started it again and I got more out of it the second time. Almost straight away. And I've read it several times since, and it's still not an easy read, but oh wow, it just blows me away every time. And that's what made me want to be a writer, yeah.
But your writing and the other authors that you reference, they're quite, it's quite lean. Like,
yes,
and unpretentious.
Yes, very different to Kate Chopin, yeah.
And direct and brilliant. But it's great that you can kind of take that inspiration of the essence of writing and how a book moves you, and then develop your own style.
I think that's it. I think you've hit the nail on the head. It's when a book moves you, and that book moved me so much that I thought, I want to be able to do this for other people.
And you have achieved that.
I hope so.
Yeah.
And that's the aim.
Now, you describe yourself as a passionate creative writing teacher, whereas you just described yourself as a contemporary writer of fiction.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering why? What is it about the teaching and the mentoring that you're so passionate about?
I suppose it's actually being able to see quite quickly the impact of my input, if that makes any sense.
It does.
I sometimes say, I teach creative writing. The only area I don't stray into is poetry, because I'm not a poet.
No,
having said that, I do have a couple of poetry students on the MA at the moment, when I'm doing my best to give them useful feedback. But I teach short story writing. Now, I've written a few short stories that I had one broadcast and a couple have been published, but I am not a very good short story writer. But I'm a much better teacher of it, because I understand how the short story works. And when I sort of deliver lessons or classes or workshops, whatever, or I help a student with a short story, I'm helping them to be a better writer than I am of short stories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you can see their work. Maybe it's because you're a bit further away from it, so you can see it more objectively as that genre.
See it improving. That's it. And I just, when I talk to a student, I do a lot of one-to-one. So sometimes it's sort of private mentoring, or I do supervision on the MA. And when I talk, a student might come in and say, I just, I'm completely lost with my novel. I don't know where it's going. I don't know what's happening. I don't know how to make this character be like I want them to be. And then we talk about it, and I see, the light in their eyes sort of going on.
There's hope.
Because it's just this. It's not that I'm telling them anything. I'm not giving them any pearls of wisdom particularly, but I'm excited about their novel, and then they get excited about it. And as we discuss it, their ideas come up. And I might feed those ideas, or I might throw something else in there, but I'm sort of helping them to really get to grips with what they're trying to say. They might not realise what they're trying to say, and I can help them do that. And I can see that I'm helping them do that, and that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah.
Whereas with my own writing, I can't see how well it's going until it's done. And that's why the first draft is so difficult.
Because, have you ever discarded a draft halfway through?
Oh, yeah, a couple of times. Yes, I've discarded 2 at about 40,000 words that I decided I couldn't make work. And another one quite recently because my editor, my agent really liked it. My editor liked it, but she felt it wasn't quite enough. She wanted my next book to make a bigger splash, apparently, which would be nice. So she said, put that one aside and come up with something else, which I'm trying to do at the moment.
Gosh. So you've got a very good relationship with your agent.
Yes.
And having spent, one thing that we do enjoy talking about, I enjoy talking about on the show, is resilience. Because I think it's something that we all need.
It's essential.
You had 6 years of struggling with the first novel and the rejection process. Mm-hmm. And then obviously a career highlight was being signed by Kate.
I was signed by Kate much earlier.
Oh, right.
It was when I got the first book deal.
Published. Yes.
So I was signed by Kate. I did the MA. I graduated from the MA in 2008, with a very rough draft of my first novel. You finish the MA, you think, I've finished my novel, but in fact you have a draft, which, a draft that I really worked on and agonised on over 3 years. But I got, I got some rejections from agents. Well, I was very lucky. The first I sent out to 5 agents, and I got an agent interested immediately. But she was about to go on maternity leave. And she said, she said, I think it does need some work. But she said, if in the unlikely event that you haven't got an agent by the time I come back, I'd like to represent you. So that just gave me such great confidence. Yeah. It was brilliant. So then I sent out again, and then I got knockbacks and rejections. And then, Kate, who is my agent now, she and another agent were interested about the same time. And that was in 2009. Okay. So I was really lucky. It was only about 8 or 9 months, actually, to get an agent, which is quite quick.
And what's that relationship like?
On a day-to-day, sort of week-to-week basis, I mean, we don't talk unless something's going on. So there can be long periods of quietness if I'm just getting on with a book. Yeah.
But if you have an idea for a book, will you go to her and say, I've had this idea, what do you think?
Yeah.
Or how far along does she get involved?
Yeah. We talk about ideas. We talk at the early stage. I haven't in the past sort of sent her much stuff in advance. Sometimes we have just talked. We've talked the plot through and we've talked about the characters. Then if I'm unsure, I did at one point, I was unsure about a novel, so I sent her a chunk. And we had a big discussion about that, and I did later decide to put that one aside. And this time, so I sent her a chunk, this time fairly recently, a few months ago, and she really liked it, and we got a submission together. But the editor said, I like it, but it's not going to make the bang. We're very involved in the editorial process, and that's what I like about her.
She's cause some agents can be really quite hands off, can't they?
Yeah. She's very hands on, but not in my face hands on, if you see what I mean.
Not intrusive.
Not intrusive.
Now, one of the things that you enjoy, and differs from writer to writer, but hate the first draft. Really like the editing process. I
love the editing process. Why? And I don't understand why people don't like it.
Oh, right.
But
have you got any hot tips for how to edit your first draft? Like, what would you do?
Okay, so I'm in the fortunate position of having my agent and editor too. I mean, obviously I do a bit of editing on my own first, of course. But okay, so your first draft, I would say, for a start, don't try to edit too quickly.
Okay.
Put it away for a bit, as long as you can bear, really. I mean, most people can't bear to leave it for more than a couple of hours, never mind a couple of days or weeks. If you can bear to put it away for a couple of weeks and just go and do something lovely for a bit and read some books and just chill
allow
out,
yourself not to do it.
Exactly. Then you can go back to it, and you'll go back to it with a more objective eye, I think, than if you go back to it too quickly. Mm-hmm. I think it's great to get other writing friends, and I stipulate other writing friends to have a look. Don't get your mates to read it. If they say, I love reading, I'll read your book. Right. Because they will be expecting something that they took off the shelf at Waterstones, and they're not going to get it. And so the feedback they give you may not be very helpful. It may be damaging. Conversely, don't give it to your mum or someone who loves you, because they're going to say, this is fantastic,
lovely, darling.
It's wonderful, darling. Yeah, you're so clever.
I don't know if my mum would, actually. But she writes.
Don't know my mum would either.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. So give it to another writer, somebody who understands and can, instead of saying I like this or I don't, can say, I can't quite visualize this bit, maybe you could X, Y or Z, and that's really useful. So I do that with a couple of other writers. We feedback stuff as we're going along, and also at first draft stage to get some feedback, which will help with editing.
Mm-hmm. Now, before you had this, before you became a professional writer, you've done everything from being a civil servant, barmaid, pot washer, journalist, cake decorator, and chef.
Yeah.
And so you
things.
Do you think that's had an impact on your writing? Working in all those different environments and with the different people.
I mean, obviously, I've used some of those experiences, especially, chefing and being in a kitchen. But I sort of don't think it's enough. I sort of would rather have had a few more jobs, really, because I think you research stuff, of course, but our first area of research is our own experience, and you mind that. And when I see people writing about, you know, they're having, I don't know, worked in theatre or even, you know, even things that aren't that exciting, but their insight, if somebody who's worked in a factory is going to have great insight into that process and can get a great character out of that. So in a way, I sort of wished I'd done a bit more, but, you know, I had a lot of...
What job would you have got in the arsenal so that you could write about it?
Oh gosh, I don't know. That's put me on the spot, that one. Don't know.
Sorry.
Don't know.
No,
if something
impossible
comes to me,
question.
I wasn't thinking of a specific thing, but just, I guess when I'm reading other people's novels and there's a little bit of detail about other world, I think, that's interesting.
It makes it real, doesn't it?
It does make it real.
Yeah.
I mean, I have written about worlds I have no experience of. I mean, I've written about nurses or a nurse, you know, put it in a hospital, and had to do a bit of research for that.
Do you enjoy that part?
I quite like, if I know what I'm researching, I enjoy. But often we don't really know what we need to research, so it can be a great way of procrastinating as well.
Yes,
I have to do my research, i.e., not write. Spend all day on the internet.
And do you miss working in a professional kitchen? Do you still cook a lot?
Oh God, I miss the professional kitchen terribly. So much so that if my husband and I are out for a meal, or I'm out for a meal with friends, and in a restaurant you see the kitchen door swing open,
you go,
you know, and you see all the chefs and the steam, and there's a pan going across the kitchen, and somebody's shouting. I think,
so exciting.
Be in there. Yeah, I really miss it. And I actually can't do it now. I used to, when I was first in Sheffield, I went back into chefing, and I did a couple of days.
Incredibly hard work, though, isn't it?
It's
long
really
hours,
hard work.
and
it's really long hours.
Physical.
It is physical, and that's why I can't do it now.
Yeah.
Partly, I just get too tired. I can't stand up for 16 hours anymore.
Unless it's Christmas dinner.
But it's like doing that. I worked for an outside catering company for quite a while here in Sheffield, and I loved that as well. We did weddings, and it would often be 2 14-hour days on the trot.
Wow.
You know, there'd be a sort of 8-hour day on Thursday, then Friday the last prep, then Saturday doing the wedding. And it was great. I loved it. I loved every minute of it. But then Sunday would be wiped out. I'd be aching from head to foot and really shattered. And also I have RSI in both hands and arms, which I struggle with typing.
I was going to say,
but that makes chefing impossible now.
Of course.
So, I can't do that anymore.
I mean, you couldn't really get too more extreme, you know, the solace of writing and that kind of... But then the camaraderie of the kitchen.
Yeah. I think that's why I miss it so much. Because it works very well together. Because I was really sort of supplementing my income as a writer by working in a kitchen. So it really worked well
combination.
For me. And if you work in kitchens, that, you know, not so much here, but when I worked in kitchens in London, you often find you're working with musicians and actors. And it, you know, that sort of work fits very nicely with creative work. Yeah. A lot of creative people in catering.
Before we finish, I would like to ask you if you've got are there any shout-outs you want to do to any other creatives or organisations within the city that are either doing interesting, fun things at the moment, or who have had a positive impact on your work?
Well, obviously, Kurious Arts, where we are now.
Oh, thank you.
No, seriously, I mean, I think this is a great innovation. I'm really pleased to see this in Sheffield. So this. But also, Sheffield Libraries, I think, are doing some
They are doing some brilliant things. The Year of Reading.
It's the Year of Reading, So there are, if you haven't heard this yet, get the brochure from the library, because there are loads of fantastic events.
Yeah, I had no idea how much was going on.
So much going on. It's really, it's really good this year. I mean, I'll say this year, this is the Year of Reading, but there's always events going on at the library, you know, year round, every year. But this year is an absolute treasure trove. One of which I'm doing myself.
Yes, coming up
on Monday, that's Monday 9th of March, I'm doing... the title of my talk is Writing Motherhood, which will be at Highfield Library in London Road. I think it's 6:30 to 7:30. It's free, but ideally it's good to register for a ticket. You can register either by going to Sheffield Library's events page, or it's through Eventbrite. You can register. Details are on my website. I'm doing another one.
Hang on, which is?
Sorry, my website is www. Well, do we say that anymore? Is there any
I
point?
I do. Yeah. 3 W's.
3 W's. SusanElliottWright.com. Am I .com all right? No,
I think you're .co.uk.
I think I'm .co.uk. Yeah, sorry about that.
Oh, well, just experiment. If you're listening, just have a go and tell us.
Have a go. Type the name in, it will come up.
Google it.
Come up. And then I'm doing another one on the 17th of March, which is writing fictional characters in the environment, the effect of the environment on characters. So that's about place and setting. And that's at Hillsborough Library.
Okay, great.
Similar thing. But yeah, do have a look at what's going on with Sheffield Libraries, because there's just loads of wonderful stuff. And the vast majority of it is free.
Yeah.
I will be doing a workshop with, masterclass, with Russ Thomas, the crime writer.
Lovely Russ. When he's back from swanning around in LA.
When he's back from swanning around on his hotshot US tour, Russ and I will be doing a masterclass on writing fictional characters. And again, it's a Sheffield Library event. There is a charge for this one, but it's only £25.
It's an absolute
you
bargain.
Get 2 best-selling writers. It's going to be great. And that's on the 14th of March on a Saturday. It's an all-day masterclass at Sheffield Central Library.
I may very well be going to that.
That would be great.
Susan Elliot Wright, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Thank you again for having me on. It's been great.
A Kurious Arts production.